This may be the end of Adam Schiff's Senate career. After a wild outburst in court and a defamation lawsuit from Judge Jeanine, insiders say resignation talks are already happening. Let's unpack the chaos. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. It all began just a few days earlier when Senator Adam Schiff, a man known for his fiery speeches and high-profile role in congressional investigations, logged onto his X account, formerly Twitter, and posted a message that would send political shockwaves across the nation. The post wasn't just bold, it was explosive. In it, Schiff accused Judge Jeanine, the outspoken former Fox News host turned legal analyst, of pushing extremist ideologies, and even more alarmingly, claimed that she had direct ties to individuals involved in the January 6th Capitol riot. Those are no small words. Coming from a sitting U.S. senator, this kind of accusation carried heavy weight and immediate consequences. Within minutes, reactions began flooding in. The post quickly racked up tens of thousands of likes, shares, and comments, with the platform erupting into a storm of both support and outrage. Some users applauded Schiff for what they saw as speaking truth to power, while others slammed him for making unsubstantiated and potentially slanderous claims. But it didn't stop at social media buzz. Legal analysts across major networks like CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC began weighing in. Where's the evidence? Became the question of the day. Political commentators and journalists, even those typically aligned with Schiff's party, were left scratching their heads. One MSNBC contributor said during a live broadcast, "This is an incredibly serious accusation to level against a private citizen, especially someone with Judge Jeanine's public profile. If there's no proof, it opens Schiff up to legal and ethical scrutiny." And that scrutiny came fast. Just hours after Schiff's post went viral, Judge Jeanine's legal team issued a scathing statement. In it, they described the senator's comments as reckless, defamatory, baseless, and politically motivated. They accused Schiff of weaponizing his political status to smear a critic and warned that they were preparing a multi-million-dollar defamation lawsuit. Their message was clear. Judge Jeanine wasn't going to let this slide. Later that evening, Jeanine herself appeared on a primetime broadcast, visibly fired up. She looked directly into the camera and addressed the American public. "Let me be crystal clear. I have zero connections to any extremist groups. I've always condemned the violence on January 6th. What Adam Schiff posted is a blatant lie, designed to destroy my name and silence my voice." That response only added fuel to the fire. Social media began to splinter into two camps. On one side, supporters of Schiff insisted he was simply exposing a dangerous figure. On the other, Judge Jeanine's defenders argued this was yet another example of elite politicians abusing their platforms to silence dissent. Hashtags began trending, including "Why Schiff lies," "Why stand with Jeanine," and "Why sue him now." But the story didn't end on Twitter. It marched straight into the courtroom. Schiff's post, and the legal firestorm it triggered, quickly became front-page news. Political talk shows were dominated by the topic. News anchors posed tough questions. Was Schiff telling the truth? Or had he crossed a dangerous legal and ethical line? Behind the scenes, Schiff's advisors reportedly scrambled to contain the fallout. According to insider sources, there were heated internal discussions about whether the tweet should be deleted, if an apology was warranted, or if the senator should double down. Ultimately, the tweet was deleted, but the damage had already been done. The deletion didn't come with an explanation, and it certainly didn't calm the storm. In fact, it raised even more eyebrows. Critics argued that Schiff was backtracking without accountability, while his legal team began quietly preparing for what would now become a very real courtroom battle. Judge Jeanine's legal team officially filed a civil suit for defamation, citing irreparable damage to her professional reputation and personal safety. They demanded not just financial compensation, but a formal retraction and public apology. Legal experts were quick to point out that defamation lawsuits involving political figures are notoriously complex. But this case had a unique twist. Judge Jeanine, while a public figure, is no longer a political office holder. And Schiff's position as a sitting U.S. senator raised serious questions about abuse of power and ethical boundaries. By the time both legal teams faced each other in court, the tension was sky high. The courtroom was filled with cameras outside, microphones pressed against the glass doors, and dozens of reporters from across the country ready to capture every dramatic moment. And then came the explosion. Schiff's shocking, unexpected meltdown that would soon dominate headlines and news alerts everywhere. His courtroom outburst was seen as not just emotional, but politically catastrophic. It confirmed what many were beginning to fear, that this case wasn't just a minor legal scuffle, it was a full-blown political crisis. A moment of online impulsiveness had now spiraled into a national scandal, and Adam Schiff, once seen as a careful strategist, was now at the center of a legal and ethical storm that could cost him everything. Never one to back down, Judge Jeanine took center stage in the way only she can, bold, fiery, and completely unapologetic. After being accused by Senator Adam Schiff of having ties to extremist organizations and pushing dangerous ideologies, Judge Jeanine didn't retreat. She hit back, hard. Just hours after the tweet from Schiff went viral, Jeanine appeared on her primetime television slot, sitting upright at the anchor desk with a determined look on her face. Viewers tuned in expecting a response, and what they got was a full-throated rebuttal that made headlines instantly. Looking straight into the camera, her tone sharp but composed, she declared, "Let me be clear. I have no ties to any extremist organization, and I will not let my name be dragged through the mud by someone trying to score cheap political points." The moment was electric. Social media exploded. Supporters flooded platforms like X, Instagram, and YouTube with clips of her statement, praising her for standing her ground and refusing to be bullied by what many described as a political smear attempt. Within just 24 hours, the hashtag #StandWithJeanine surged to the top of trending topics nationwide. The response wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. Jeanine's message hit all the right notes: strength, clarity, and defiance. Her team knew this wasn't just about correcting the record. It was about reclaiming control of the narrative. She didn't stop at one appearance. In the days that followed, Judge Jeanine took to her social media accounts to issue a series of carefully worded posts, doubling down on her message. One post read, "When politicians use their power to lie and defame, it's not just wrong, it's dangerous. Truth matters, accountability matters." That one line, "Truth matters, accountability matters," was quickly adopted by her supporters, becoming a kind of slogan for what was now being seen as a much bigger battle than just a legal dispute. And that's exactly what this case was turning into: a symbolic fight for free speech, political accountability, and media integrity. Support came pouring in from across the political spectrum, not just from Jeanine's conservative base, but also from civil liberties advocates, journalists, and even some moderate Democrats who viewed Schiff's tweet as an abuse of power. People began asking serious questions. Should a sitting senator be allowed to accuse a private citizen, without evidence, of ties to criminal behavior? Where is the line between political commentary and defamation, and how do we hold public officials accountable when they cross that line? These questions struck a chord with millions of Americans who are increasingly concerned about the erosion of trust in both government and media. Jeanine's case became more than just a lawsuit. It became a rallying cry for anyone who felt silenced, misrepresented, or unfairly targeted by the political elite. Meanwhile, the consequences for Senator Adam Schiff began to mount rapidly: political. Analysts noted that Schiff's decision to go after Jeanine was likely an attempt to energize his base or draw attention during a slow news cycle. But the plan backfired spectacularly. Not only did his tweet fail to gain support among fellow lawmakers, it actually alienated some of his own allies. Democratic leaders like Senator Joe Manchin and Representative Abigail Spanberger distanced themselves from the controversy, stating that Schiff's comments were ill-advised and regrettable. Several ethics watchdog groups began filing formal complaints to the Senate Ethics Committee, demanding an investigation into whether Schiff had violated Senate rules by using his position to launch unfounded personal attacks. At the same time, Schiff's approval ratings in his home state began to dip. Online petitions calling for his removal or censure gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures. Cable news outlets covered the story around the clock, featuring legal experts who openly questioned whether Schiff had crossed the line into defamation and character assassination. Behind the scenes, pressure was mounting. Schiff's office reportedly received a flurry of phone calls from concerned donors and constituents. Multiple staffers were said to be working overtime on crisis management, trying to spin the narrative back in his favor. But by then, the public had already made up its mind. Schiff had gone too far. And as the legal battle inched closer to the courtroom, the stakes only grew higher. Judge Jeanine's legal team wasn't just seeking financial damages, they were demanding a public apology, a full retraction, and a statement from Schiff acknowledging the harm caused by his reckless remarks. At this point, the outcome of the case was no longer just about money or reputation. It was about setting a precedent. It was about showing that even high-ranking elected officials can't hurl baseless accusations without consequence. Jeanine, for her part, remained unshaken. In a follow-up broadcast, she ended her segment with a message that resonated with viewers across the country. I've been a judge, a prosecutor, and a journalist. I've seen truth twisted in every way imaginable, but I've never backed down, and I'm not about to start now. Her words captured the essence of the fight ahead, a legal showdown that would test the boundaries of political speech, personal accountability, and the limits of power in a digital age. The political backlash was swift, and it didn't care about party lines. Following Adam Schiff's now-deleted post accusing Judge Jeanine Pirro of having ties to January 6th rioters, prominent figures from both the Democratic and Republican parties came forward to condemn his actions. The reaction wasn't just loud, it was damning. One of the first voices from Schiff's own side to speak out was Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema, known for her independent streak. During a press conference, she called the tweet deeply inappropriate and said that public officials have a responsibility to speak carefully, especially when their words could endanger someone's reputation or safety. That statement hit hard. Schiff wasn't just being criticized by political opponents. He was facing public scrutiny from members of his own caucus. On the Republican side, the condemnation was even more severe. Senator Josh Hawley didn't mince words when asked about Schiff's conduct. He accused the California senator of weaponizing misinformation for political gain and said, "It's disgraceful to see a member of the United States Senate behave like an online troll. This isn't politics, it's personal destruction." And it didn't stop there. Across cable news and political podcasts, lawmakers, journalists, and commentators began asking the same question. Had Schiff finally gone too far? As the controversy gained momentum, multiple organizations filed formal complaints with the Senate Ethics Committee, a rare step usually reserved for serious allegations of misconduct. The complaints came from legal foundations, civil rights organizations, and even bipartisan watchdog groups. They didn't hold back. The formal filings alleged that Schiff had violated the Senate's Code of Conduct, which requires members to uphold integrity and avoid making false statements that damage the credibility of the institution. Used his office to intimidate a private citizen by publicly accusing Judge Jeanine, without evidence, of having criminal connections, undermined public trust in the judiciary by attacking a well-known legal analyst and former judge with baseless inflammatory rhetoric. The Ethics Committee, known for its cautious and quiet approach to disciplinary issues, had no choice but to begin a preliminary inquiry. While the process was still in its early stages, legal scholars began weighing in. Many noted that if the allegations were substantiated, Schiff could face serious consequences. One prominent constitutional law professor told a CNN panel, "We're not talking about a slap on the wrist here. If the committee determines that
Senator Schiff
abused his platform to defame a private citizen, it could trigger penalties ranging from official censure to suspension, or in the most extreme case, expulsion from the Senate. And that would be historic. Let's be clear, expulsion from the United States Senate is almost unheard of. Only 15 senators in U.S. history have ever been expelled, and most of those occurred during the Civil War era for siding with the Confederacy. For Schiff to even be discussed in that context underscored just how severe this situation had become. Meanwhile, Schiff remained largely silent in public. His staff issued vague statements about free speech and concern for extremism, but avoided addressing the specifics of his deleted tweet. That only deepened the public's suspicion. Behind closed doors, however, Washington insiders said the senator was under immense pressure. Donors were pulling back. Staffers were being grilled by journalists, some members of Schiff's own committee. Assignments were reportedly considering requesting his removal, a move that would further isolate him politically. All of this pressure, the media scrutiny, the bipartisan condemnation, the ethics investigation, was boiling over. And it was all building up to a dramatic showdown in court. Everyone knew the day was coming, when Schiff would have to face Judge Jeanine's legal team in person and respond, under oath, to what had become one of the most explosive defamation cases in modern political memory. The media dubbed it the defamation showdown of the decade. Cable news networks scheduled wall-to-wall coverage. Social media platforms braced for a flood of hot takes and commentary. Protesters and supporters of both figures began organizing rallies outside the courthouse. In just a few short weeks, a single tweet had turned into a national firestorm. A sitting senator was under investigation by his own chamber. A former judge and media icon was fighting for her name and reputation. And Americans were watching, closely, because this wasn't just a story about Adam Schiff and Jeanine Pirro anymore. This had become a story about how far political figures can go in the digital age without consequence, and what happens when free speech collides with personal accountability. As Schiff prepared to walk into that courtroom, the stakes couldn't have been higher. His career, his credibility, and possibly his Senate seat, all on the line. The air inside the courtroom was thick with tension. Every seat was filled, journalists scribbling notes, legal analysts whispering predictions, and political observers eyeing every twitch and gesture from the key players. As the defamation trial of Senator Adam Schiff versus Judge Jeanine Pirro officially began, it was clear. This was no ordinary legal proceeding. Everyone knew this trial wasn't just about a single tweet. It had become a national moment, a confrontation over truth, power, and the boundaries of political speech in a digital age. From the very start, the tone was serious. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but reporters relayed every detail as it unfolded. Judge Jeanine sat calmly, flanked by her legal team, while Schiff appeared visibly tense, frequently glancing at his attorneys and shuffling papers nervously. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for, the cross-examination. With the entire courtroom holding its breath, Judge Jeanine's lead attorney rose and asked the question that would become the turning point of the trial. Senator Schiff, do you have evidence to support your claim that the plaintiff has ties to extremist groups? The room froze. Schiff cleared his throat, looked down at his notes, and replied, "The post was based on widely circulated reports and my personal judgment." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The presiding judge, clearly unsatisfied with the vague response, leaned forward and repeated the question. This time, more firmly. "Senator, do you have any verifiable, documented evidence? Yes or no?" Schiff hesitated. He began flipping through a folder, stammered something about public opinion pieces, and mentioned hearsay from anonymous sources. The judge's expression darkened. "Senator, let me remind you that making unfounded or defamatory statements under oath carries serious legal consequences." And that's when it happened, the moment that would dominate headlines across the country. Schiff suddenly stood up, his voice rising. "This is absolutely outrageous. I'm being attacked for speaking the truth. This court is biased. It's falling under the influence of far-right propaganda. Gasps echoed throughout the chamber. Court officers took a step forward. Some reporters dropped their pens in shock. Schiff's legal team immediately sprang into action, urgently whispering and motioning for him to sit down. One attorney grabbed his arm and gently pulled him back into his seat. The judge banged the gavel, calling for order. "This courtroom will maintain decorum," the judge said sternly. "Senator Schiff, any further outbursts will result in sanctions or removal from these proceedings." The damage, however, had already been done. Within minutes, news alerts from CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and independent outlets flashed across phones nationwide. Adam Schiff loses control in courtroom meltdown. Schiff shouts at judge after failing to produce evidence. Clips of reporters recounting the event went viral on social media. Hashtags like Schiff Meltdown, Courtroom Chaos, and Truth on Trial began trending across platforms. Even late-night talk shows picked it up, with comedians poking fun at the senator's fiery reaction. But behind the media frenzy was a very real legal consequence. Schiff's refusal, or inability, to provide hard evidence had severely damaged his credibility in the eyes of the court. Legal analysts were quick to point out that his courtroom outburst could be interpreted as a sign of frustration under pressure, or worse, guilt. Judge Jeanine's legal team capitalized on the moment. In a press conference held shortly after, "Court recessed," her lead attorney stated, "Today we saw exactly why this lawsuit was necessary. When given the chance to back up his reckless statements with facts, Senator Schiff couldn't do it. This is about more than politics. It's about protecting the truth." Support for Jeanine surged again. Conservative figures, media personalities, and even independent journalists rallied around her, praising her restraint and professionalism throughout the ordeal. Her supporters argued that her name had been dragged through the mud without cause, and that she had stood tall in the face of public defamation. Meanwhile, Schiff's team went into crisis mode. Behind the scenes, there were reports of campaign donors backing away, party strategists distancing themselves, and internal discussions about potential fallout within the Senate. The Ethics Committee, which had already launched a preliminary inquiry, now had explosive new material to consider, including Schiff's behavior under oath and his inflammatory courtroom remarks. As the trial continued, one thing became clear. Schiff's tweet had opened a door he couldn't close. What began as a 280-character post turned into a firestorm of legal, political, and personal consequences, culminating in a courtroom breakdown seen by millions. And while the judge's final ruling was still to come, many observers felt the real verdict had already been delivered. As of today, the political storm surrounding Senator Adam Schiff is far from over. In fact, it's growing stronger by the hour. Behind tightly closed doors in Washington, the Senate Ethics Committee is reportedly holding intense, ongoing discussions. Their focus? Whether Adam Schiff should face formal disciplinary action for his now infamous tweet targeting Judge Jeanine Pirro, one that exploded into a full-blown defamation case and public scandal. While no formal charges have been announced, yet multiple credible insiders have confirmed that resignation talks are on the table. That's right. Sources close to the committee say Schiff's team has floated the possibility of stepping down as a way to avoid harsher penalties like suspension or expulsion. And while Schiff continues to appear in public and speak confidently, the pressure is mounting behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Judge Jeanine Pirro is not backing down. Her legal team recently filed an amended complaint, increasing the demand for damages to a staggering $25 million, but she's not just asking for money. She's demanding a formal retraction and a public apology from Senator Schiff. So far, Schiff has refused to issue either. Legal experts say that's a risky move. Schiff's legal options are narrowing by the day, one attorney told The Hill. This is a textbook defamation case, and it's being watched at the highest levels of government. If Schiff is found guilty in court, it won't just be a legal defeat. It could trigger a political collapse. His credibility would take a devastating hit, and his future as a U.S. senator would be thrown into serious doubt. A former federal judge, interviewed on CNN, didn't mince words. When a sitting senator uses their national platform to publicly accuse a private citizen of something as serious as ties to extremism, without evidence, that's not just irresponsible. It's dangerous. That comment echoed loudly across social media. Many Americans, regardless of political affiliation, began to ask the same question. Has Adam Schiff finally crossed a line that even his supporters can't defend? Polls seem to suggest the answer might be yes. A new independent poll shows that over 60% of Schiff's constituents disapprove of how he's handled the controversy. In liberal-leaning California, where he was once considered a top contender for a future presidential run, his support is eroding quickly. Donors have reportedly begun pulling their support. Party leaders are staying quiet. Even some of Schiff's longtime allies in the Senate have privately voiced frustration, worried that his scandal is becoming a distraction for the Democratic Party heading into a critical election cycle. Public trust, once one of Schiff's strongest assets, is now on life support. And while the courtroom proceedings are still ongoing, one thing is already crystal clear. This case is no longer just about politics. It's about personal responsibility, public accountability, and the real-world consequences of words, especially when they come from the powerful. As Schiff's lawyers scramble to contain the fallout, Judge Jeanine continues to gain ground in the court of public opinion. Her poised and assertive public appearances have earned her a new wave of support, even from some who didn't agree with her politically in the past. She's positioned herself as a fighter for truth, integrity, and media fairness, and in this case, it's resonating. Meanwhile, Schiff faces what could be the defining moment of his political career. The Ethics Committee's final decision is expected soon, and depending on the outcome of the civil trial, he could face not only financial liability, but a forced resignation or even full expulsion from the Senate. For a man who once stood at the forefront of high-profile congressional investigations, the irony is hard to miss. He's now the one under investigation. And so the big question remains, will Adam Schiff be forced out of the Senate because of one reckless post? Or will he somehow survive this storm, rebuild his image, and emerge even stronger on the other side? Only time and the court will tell. But one thing is certain. This is a political lesson for the digital age. In a world where a single tweet can ignite a national scandal, words aren't just powerful, they're permanent. So what do you think? Will Schiff walk away or fight until the bitter end? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates as this political drama unfolds.